Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Middleton. Thank you for attending the Prince George's County Recreation Blue Ribbon Work Group meeting. Thank you for. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. We just wanted to let you know that this is our next meeting. We'll be receiving a new presentation from our consultant Barry Dunn to discuss financials for recreation services here in Prince George's County. In addition, we will be introducing our new chair of this Blue Ribbon Work Group, Ms. Donna Herring. She will be with you in just a moment. And if there are any questions or anyone who wants to participate in the work group's activities outside of these meetings, please feel free to visit the work group's social pinpoint site and join the conversation there. And you can stay abreast of what's going on with the work group. In addition, if you like to communicate with us at all, please feel free to send an email at recreationworkgroup@co.pg.md.us. I know it's a mouthful, so I'll say it again. That's recreationworkgroup@co.pg.md.us. Now, without further ado, I will pass the mic over to our new chair, Ms. Donna Herring. Donna?
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. The time is now 2:08 p.m. Please be advised this meeting is being recorded for documentation purposes. Mr. Middleton, would you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. One moment, please. Okay. Faye Martin Howell.
Present.
Matthew Onohafe.
Here.
Kathy Stasny. Kathy?
Ryan, she's waving her hand, saying
Oh, okay.
she's present. She's on mute, though.
Gotcha. Thank you. Stephanie Neal.
Present.
Kevin Roth.
Present.
Ryan Jackson.
Present.
Bill Sheehan.
Present.
Wanda Ramos.
Present.
Delegate Andrea Harrison. She was not able to attend. Marcus Thomas. Senator Joanne Benson. Gino Wren. And Rhonda Dallas. They were not able to attend today. So far we have 9 members present, Madam Chair.
And that is the quorum, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Know that we have a quorum. Can I get a motion to accept the agenda?
I move that the agenda be accepted as written.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I second it.
I have a motion and a second. This brings the agenda to the floor. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Prince George's County Recreation Blue Ribbon Work Group. This work group was established for the purpose of conducting a study and providing recommendations to the Prince George's County Council regarding several aspects of providing recreational services in the county. We have retained the services of Barry Dunn to assist with this project. I'll now turn the floor over to Barry Dunn to present their update.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. My name is Lisa Paradis. I'm the project manager for this project, and I will be walking you through. Hopefully you can see my screen. Give me a heads up, Ryan. Yes, great. Thank you. I'll be walking you through this update with the help from 2 of our Barry Dunn colleagues, 3 actually, Barbara Heller, who you can see, Danny Wilson, and JR or James Clinton. All right. So a little bit more of an expanded agenda than we had on your original agenda. This is the agenda that we have for today. We'll go ahead and briefly review the purpose of the panel for edification of everyone listening, as well as for the panel members after input from the prior meeting. and review the project process, the process that Barry Dunn is using to work our way through the analysis, and that will highlight community input, some of the current environment that we see as our initial evaluation, and then to walk you through some of the scenarios that we are anticipating creating during the study. We will then talk about the subcommittee work groups, or based on Ryan's information before, we may move that to the end, actually, because we will be going into a closed session. And then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into the analysis so that we can look a little bit more deeply into some of the information that has emerged thus far in programs and services, budget and finance and operations. And then lastly, we will be giving you some highlights about the next steps over the next couple of weeks that we will be undertaking. If there are any questions, I can pause right here. If there are not, we'll move on. Great, thank you. As far as the timeline goes for this project, you can see right here that we are in the second phase of this, which is the data gathering and analysis phase. This is the meat on the bone, and we are in the midst of this. We anticipate being finished with this analysis, data gathering and analysis portion of this by the end of January. And then we will head into draft study and final report with adoption anticipated for April. Okay, so we wanted to really talk high level of the Blue Ribbon Panel's purpose. So we thought this was an important thing to sort of highlight at the beginning of this of each meeting, so that we all were a little bit grounded about what the charge was of the study, Blue Ribbon Panel study. So we put this into just a couple of blocks here, and direct quote from the information that was sent out by the council, and that is to determine the most efficient way to provide the services within the county. And we anticipate there being 3 different scenarios here, and that's exactly what was outlined as part of this, as the study. A would be continue to have services provided by the MNC PPC. B, become a direct part of county government, or C, reside in a newly created quasi-public authority. How does this recreation study support the work group's charge? And we've broken this down into 5 different areas. The first is, of course, programming, understanding that there is this access to existing youth, sports, arts, and recreation programming. Facilities, improving the access to publicly owned facilities. Opportunities, which would involve improving the access to opportunities for the entire county based from an equity standpoint. And some of the considerations, of course, within the study are potential costs, benefits, advantages, and disadvantages of the bifurcation. And then lastly is the strategy. What will be the strategy as we head into an approach for this, and how a different entity could fund the costs of bifurcation. So in terms of process review, we've looked, we're going to give you a high level highlights of these 3 areas: community input, your current environment, and then some of the scenarios that we anticipate. Okay, I'm sorry, that's out of. Okay, so in terms of subcommittee work groups, there will be 3 work groups, and those will be programs and services, which Danny Wilson, who is in your screen here, one of the consultants from Barry Dunn, will be leading. There is going to be finance and budget, which J.R. Clanton, who's in your screen as well, we will be leading. And then operations, which Barbara Heller, who is in this call as well, and myself will be leading that group. We anticipate there will be 3 meetings, one happening in December, obviously before the holidays begin, one in January, and then another one in February. And that, of course, is not cast in stone. We will be listening to the work groups to decide, to the subcommittees to decide if that is the right approach to this. And then once the panel members choose a work group, the lead person for each one of those groups will coordinate and schedule meetings. They don't have to be all at the same time. And that will be obviously up to the work group members to decide when those will be. Subcommittee work groups, well, this is just an example. Actually, Barry Dunn has just completed a little bit over 6 months ago, a strategic plan for the youth sports, countywide youth sports division that was newly created under the county executive order. And this is one of the examples of the work that are the information that can be provided to work groups. And what you're seeing here is a map, a heat map of all of the assets for the facility assets for the entire county. It's obviously a little bit small here, but in real life, it plays out in different layers. It shows you where all of the public school properties are located, as well as all of the other county properties that currently have programs and services offered within them. So we will have access to some really decent data to get us started with some of the work that the subcommittees will be doing. In terms of the data analysis updates, we wanted to bring you up to speed on community engagement and let you know that the Social Pinpoint website, and just to let you know, oftentimes we acknowledge that Social Pinpoint may not be something that you understand. That is actually the platform that is used. That's the name of the software, and Social Pinpoint is the platform that we use for this. And so it is a repository for all of the information. It's meant to be a repository for all of the information for this particular plan. And in its initial stages right now, it is used as a community input to gain feedback from the community, to understand some of the thoughts and to gain information from the community on this particular study. To date, we've had 2,616 total visits with 1,090 unique visitors. Average time spent there has been just over a minute. We've had 134 unique stakeholders and a total of 119 comments and 103 survey responses. And I just pulled those numbers. So that's very much up to date. There were just a couple of dozen that were actually input overnight from yesterday's numbers. So that's actually a really good number. We will work with the committee to establish a closing time for these surveys and to collect feedback, so that we can then begin our analysis and wrap that into the larger program report document. And so I guess you may want to be thinking about what that timeline would look like, what a date for closing down this information, because we will need to put a hard stop on that at some point to the general public, so that we can start to compile and analyze that data. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Danny Wilson, who is going to give us some feedback on some recreation analysis.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Wanted to give a little bit of an update on where we've been heading with the data analysis for the recreation programs and services analysis. And so I'll just rewind our brains to the last presentation, where we started looking overall total numbers of activities and total numbers of enrollees. And now what we can start to do with that data is break it down even further. And this is an example of one way we can break that down, where we can say between the two counties, the different facility locations, where are these activities being offered? So on the left, you see with Prince George's County, over 7,000 of the activities were offered in facilities located in that county, and Montgomery County had about 5,500 activities. Similar comparison as far as the number of enrollees within the locations, and this does not represent where the enrollees come from, where the households are. We have a different analysis for that. So this is just how many people are being served at the facilities within the two counties for registration-based programming. 4,600 or so were enrolled Prince George's County, 2,100 or so enrolled in Montgomery County. And this is 2020 to 2021 data. Just wanted to make sure we clarify where this data is coming from. And what that starts to inform is we look at the current environment, we then look at these scenarios. One of the scenarios on the table for consideration is what would happen if these services started breaking apart between locations. And so this is what will help inform your decisions in the future. And the next slide breaks it down even further.
Can I
where
ask
we
a
look
question
at
before you, I'm sorry,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
can't find my hand. I finally figured out how to unmute myself. So I'm sorry I jumped in. Can you just go back to that slide? Or, so we're looking at a time frame that was during the pandemic. And this is when schools were closed as well as community centers. That's a question.
Yes, so this is going to follow the fiscal year data. And so, yes, that is, we have data actually from 2020 to 2021, and then we have the following year as well. So we do have both years' data. We're just showing the single year on this particular slide. We've done this same analysis for both years.
Would it not be a good idea to look at, excuse me, before the pandemic, when things were all open across the board? I feel like this is hard to see.
Sure. What we're seeing so far is between the two fiscal years data that we have been provided so far, that you can see elevation in these numbers between the two fiscal years as far as number of activities, kind of more so with enrollment. So yes, we see what you're saying. There's, on the other flip side would be the argument of life isn't like that anymore. You know, that's something that we could bring to the subcommittee work and the table and say, do we need to also assess previous years? So it's a really great point. I appreciate you bringing it up, and this is exactly why this work group exists. So thank you so much. So we'll bring that to the table in upcoming meetings for sure. Thank you for that question. And so the second slide does demonstrate more detail. And again, we can dive into this. This was in your packet. We can dive into this in the subcommittee as well, where we start to say, okay, well, what does this mean between program areas? So for example, performing arts on the right-hand side and visual arts, you can see that there's a difference in the number of activities that were offered between the two counties, which was almost double, closer to double for Montgomery County for performing arts as opposed to Prince George's County. But conversely, for visual arts, it's the complete opposite. So again, what this will do is help us determine if in that scenario things were to be split, are there any gaps that would result? Would there be program areas where there might be we might have to consider different facility space or different provision, different agreements, et cetera. So this just helps us understand where those programs are being offered and the enrollees and where they're coming from. And to your point, some of those areas didn't see registrants in this fiscal year. The following fiscal year does show enrollments in some of these areas. So yeah, thanks, Lisa. We'll jump to that final slide in this section. We also did a similar breakdown by age segment. So when you think of, well, who is being reached in those areas, in those geographic areas between the two counties, and again, by the count of activities and by the sum of those enrolled. And really, Prince George's County had more offered in every age segment and had more enrollees in every age segment. And so one of the questions on the table was, well, how can we ensure access for everyone in Prince George's County? And right now, when you look at age segmentation, so far things look like the access across age segments have been actually in the favor of Prince George's County. So these are the types of data points that we'll consider as we feed into those future scenarios that we'll build out for you.
Thanks, Danny. I'm going to turn it over to J.R. Clanton, who's going to give us an update on his financial analysis.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Danny. And yeah, I just wanted to take some time today to talk to you all about some of the financial work that's been going on behind the scenes to really drill down into how much it costs to provide recreation services. And so where we started with this analysis was reviewing line item budget details for fiscal years 21 and 22. And the line item details that we were reviewing were actually pretty extensive. Recreation services seem to be provided across 41 revenue funds and 37 expenditure funds. And so, you know, there were thousands upon thousands of lines of data to really look through and try to figure out what was going on. And at the end of the day, you know, we decided to really focus a lot of the presentation you're seeing here today just on the recreation fund, because it contains, like you see there, 80% of the provided budgeted revenues and expenditures. I also wanted to talk to you all about, before we dive into any numbers, just talk about the limitations of the analysis you're seeing. This is not a fully baked product here. Okay, this is an analysis that is ongoing. And so we can provide you an update about where we are with it, but I also want to be clear about the limitations and the other things that we continue to need to gather and to analyze in order to give you a complete and accurate picture. And so, again, I want to emphasize that right now what you're looking at is it's only numbers that are in a line item budget report. There's nothing in here about the whys. There's nothing in here that's telling the stories about what's going on, why monies are being transferred, why expenditures are being booked the way they are, those sorts of things. And the other limitation of this data, which will also speak to where we're going with this data, is that the account numbers that you'll see in a line item budget report do not perfectly sync with the programs that Danny was just going over. And so as we move forward with this analysis, a really important part of determining how much recreation services just in Prince George County could cost is going to rely upon us working with staff in order to really determine what programs are feeding into what line items.
James, I have a question.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Sure. Do these numbers include only Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, or does the Montgomery County numbers include any special services they have, separate services?
I don't 100% know the answer to that question. What I can say is for the financials that were provided for me, it seems to be coming from the commission, and it is a pretty exhaustive list of what it costs for them to provide recreation services.
Okay, and for the other metrics that were mentioned previously, how about those numbers that Danielle mentioned? Are those strictly Maryland National Capital Park and Planning data, or does Montgomery County's number include separate services?
Danny, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I failed to mention, no, I don't say failed. I had intended to mention that one of our next steps, and that's actually on our one of the last slides of the presentation, is that we, JR and I really want to talk to the staff and make sure we fully understand the answer to that question, that we understand what data was sent to us in format, but we want to understand what was exactly pulled and where the alignment is. So that is a very great question. And so I'm going to similarly respond as JR did, that we want to clarify that for you and for ourselves so that we can give you as clear of an answer as possible.
Okay, so in the upcoming discussions, you'll mention if it's apple to apple or not. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of what you're getting into right now with those questions, Donna, is exactly the kind of analysis that we'll be going through here in the next month or two, as we really dive into what is the story behind these numbers, what's going on to really determine how much it costs to provide these services in this location.
So I just want to clarify that the numbers that, at least the ones that I've provided, came from Prince George's County, right? So all the information that you see here is actually Prince George's County only, not Montgomery County.
Right. No, I was just, if we saw some comparative numbers, I just wanted to know.
Right.
Yeah. Because they were comparing earlier with Montgomery County. So I just wanted to make sure every time we see a slide with both, what it can take.
I think these numbers are from Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission.
I understood. Thank you.
Great. So after doing quite a bit of analysis to really trim down and organize this data and really start getting to numbers that are manageable and able to work with, this is what the revenue numbers look like for fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. And it's a fiscal year that goes July to June. So fiscal year 21 spans that 20 to 21 timeframe, and then fiscal year 22 spans the July 21 to June 22 timeframe. So that's what we're looking at here. And so one of the big takeaways you can look at just looking at this data is that the recreation services are heavily, the largest funding source by far is tax revenue. That's what that PGC non-departmental account number is primarily has in it, is tax revenues. And so when it comes to things like cost recovery from the individual programs that we're looking at that are provided in all those different areas, you're not looking at a very high percentage of cost recovery. Lisa, next slide. Yeah, and so then the other side of the token is expenditures. And as you can see, just by looking at it, there are more expenditure categories than there are revenue categories. And so actually going into where revenues are distributed for different programs is going to take further analysis. And it's going to take us working with the commission to really start getting down into that information. But I wanted you to see, so here you can see all the different cost centers as they're organized and what their totals are. Yes, Faye?
I have a question about the previous slide. Could we go back to that for a minute, please?
Yes.
And my question is, okay, for example, with the sports health and wellness, the second line, there's an adopted amount of 4 million, and then there's an actual amount of 976,000. What happens to the adopted amount of monies when it's not spent when it's not actually spent?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's the kind of information that we'll speak with the staff about, is to really get down to the information of why wasn't, what's going on with the actuals collected being so different from the adopted budget, because there can be any kind of number of stories or reasons behind that. I mean, it could be something as simple as a grant was budgeted and a grant wasn't received. But that's not what I'm saying happened here. We don't know.
Right.
Until we actually meet with staff, we don't know what the story is behind the difference between the actuals and the adopted. Speaking very, very generally, general budgeting practice, the adopted revenues and the actual revenues, if it's not received, it's not received. Now, on the expenditure side of it, sometimes you can have a situation where at the beginning of the year, typically most government agencies have their budgets allocated based upon predicted or estimated and adopted revenues for the year. And so in theory, you could spend against those anticipated revenues as you want. But as you can see from this and the next slide, they did not overspend their budget. They did not overspend their revenues. So even though that they were expecting or anticipated and budgeted rather $99 million in revenues, they had actuals of 81. Their expenditures did not exceed did not exceed the 81.
Right. I think my biggest concern is, we're paying taxes, and then what happens if we don't spend that money? That's just one of the questions that maybe will
Mhm.
get answered before the end.
Yeah.
And
that's a
and I'll
great
just
question.
add too, that there's a great variation in these numbers. And Wanda, you can add to anything I say here, but a lot of it had to do with restructuring throughout the agency. And that's why there's some real big fluctuations. Just the money that was allocated one year because of restructuring, the money's in different buckets. So that's why you see these numbers and you think, holy smokes, what's going on here? Well, it's all because they're just being allocated in different buckets.
A quick question, will your flux analysis be shared with us so that we know, what actually happened with the differences, if it was a large difference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's also an important part of the story. So that would be the kind of thing that absolutely would be appropriate to have, presented to the group, which is, what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
And JR, I'll just jump in and circle us back to that reminder that COVID was in the middle of this as well. So even though the budget might have been real high, and I see Wanda nodding, thank you. We may have budgeted to have all this revenue, but when COVID happened, the pandemic happened and things shut down, couldn't secure those earned revenues quite as much. So, and I'll add that back into the context of what happened on paper.
That's correct. And thank you for bringing that up, because that is one of the items that, we've been through COVID for 2 years. We were closed for most of 2020 or all of 2020, and we didn't get back to full capacity in our buildings for classes. We had limited. So that's where the revenue is also not presented here that way. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I'll pause for another minute to see if there are any other questions before we move on. Okay.
I'm
With that-
assuming that the northern area and central area are similar in population, whereas the southern area, it just seems like it's always more. Is there a resemblance to, is there a comparison to the northern area and central area and southern area?
We don't, well, I'm sure the agency has that. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can look at that information for sure.
Okay, well, that's maybe my question. Maybe it is money allocated per population, or how's the money allocated?
Gotcha.
A lot of it has to do with facilities. Like if I'm in the southern area and there just happens to be more facilities, that's going to require more operating expense than another area that might not have enough. So a lot of it is not only dictated by population, but also the amenities that are located within not only the amenities, but programs that are located within each of those areas.
Okay.
That's correct. At this point, area operations, northern area operations, central area and southern area, that we were divided. This is primarily community centers. And each area had 15 community centers. However, southern area has what we call a multi-gen and a southern area technology center that require more funding for those programs. And it's open longer hours too. So that's why the difference in the budget there.
And what I would also say as a follow-up to Wanda's comments, the strategic plan that we completed last year showed that while there were great gains made in equity in terms of facilities, there was a long way to go in terms of providing equitable facilities, athletic facilities in particular, for the southern area. And that's some of the information that we will bring to the table. Okay, with that, we're gonna slide into a little bit of the operations side. I'm gonna turn it over to Barbara Heller to talk a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, what I'd like to do here, Lisa, is I want to go through every single line on this chart. I'll take about 2 hours to do that, but then you'll have a real good idea of everything. And of course, I'm kidding. Yeah, so one of the most important elements of taking a look at just operations and how MNC PPC operates is getting a sense of the structure. So we have a copy, a very detailed copy of the structure, and we intend to go on site at some point. We need to get that scheduled. Wanda, looking forward to seeing you. But yeah, just getting a sense of how this all works. We'd also want to get some context to the way the organization was structured previously to this and how are things going. It's about 6 months old. So this will give us a really good window into operations. And, you know, we have these 3 different committees, but they're not going to be, the work won't be done in isolation of each other because it's so interconnected. So we'll make sure that we look at financial information and the recreation programming information in the context of how it's currently structured. And does this structure make the most sense? We'll also want to get a sense of just overall operational performance, you know, at customer satisfaction results, because that's certainly an important indicator of how effective an organization is. So customer satisfaction, we'll want to take a look at any kind of performance metrics that exist to give a sense of where MNC PPC is operating within that. And Kevin Roth, you'd be pleased to hear that we've tapped into the NRPA. NRPA, National Recreation and Park Association, has a park metrics program that identifies different amenities and budget and population comparison information. We can take a look at that, but I know one of the limitations is we're just going to be looking at recreation. Most of the agency information included in that information has entire organization, but we may be able to carve out some of that and put some context to similarly sized organizations. The other thing that we'll include too is we have a team member who's not on the call today that is taking a look at just other national examples of studies similar to this, and can we learn anything from that research? So that's kind of operations in a nutshell.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
You're going to be looking at customer surveys, satisfaction surveys of park
Yes.
and of Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Now we're looking at that, plus we're looking at an authority, and we're also looking at the county. So 3 different options.
Yes.
Will we be looking at a customer survey of Prince George's County and possibly, I don't know what to compare it with. There was an authority at one time when the Sports and Learning Complex first came online. It was under an authority. I don't know if there was some old surveys from customer service at that point. I don't know if they're even relevant.
Yeah.
Comparing
Well,
apples to apples.
Yeah. Like, so for the county, I don't know what we would be able to connect to since they do not have, we would certainly want to compare customer satisfaction for recreation services to customer satisfaction for recreation services. I will say that there's a survey company that we work with called ETC Institute, and they have a database of probably approaching 1,000 agencies around the United States that have benchmark information. In fact, there was a slide that we showed at the previous meeting that had just one set of information. We can look at that. That might be a better way of comparing information. Like if we found an authority in Arkansas and took a look at their customer satisfaction, that would probably be less relevant than taking a look at 1,000 agency database of some customer satisfaction metrics, and we'll be able to use that. But good question.
I will also say that we've started our benchmarking and best practices, if you will, of research on other organizations for this. And I got to tell you, it's really, really slim, the information out there. There are just not a lot of comparables. And I guess, again, this goes back to some of the work that we will be doing with the subcommittee members to determine an approach that might seem reasonable for everybody, based on the fact that we just are not going to have a lot of very apples to apples information for national benchmarking, that is. Okay, pause here for a second. All right, then we just are looking toward next steps. So what's next? As we're completing the next couple of months of analysis, you know, we are listening, asking more questions, deeper questions, broader questions that we need to ask, and then analyzing that information so that we can have that completed by the end of January. So we will be conducting more meetings with staff and key individuals. We are trying to schedule that right now. We anticipate the first couple of weeks of January to be on site with our entire team, as well, with meeting with the staff at MNCPPC. And we are looking to schedule listening session number 2, which would be our community stakeholder approach to hearing what the community has to say. We had several members of the community weigh in on the last one, and we'll work with Ryan to schedule the next one for December after this, after we're finished with this meeting today. And then, of course, working with the subcommittee members to schedule those subcommittee meetings. And at this point, we are going to turn it over to you to see if you have any other questions.
Question for you. When you schedule the community meetings, do you ask specific questions, or do you just say there will be a community meeting about this work group? How do you get to the community?
That's a good question. Ryan and the county exec's office has been the lead in that. So I'll turn it to Ryan to ask. I do know that there's a considerable effort put forth on the social media forefront, and I'll ask Ryan to answer that question as well.
So Delegate, we're going to redouble our efforts from the last one. We didn't get as many people participating as we wanted to. But for the next listening session, what we will do is we're definitely going to promote it on the website, promote the website. Anyone who has participated on the website, sent an email with regards to this matter, will receive the sign-up sheet to ask them to participate if they have any questions, if they have any comments. We will invite them to participate in the listening session. There will probably be some specific questions that we will include in the sheet, just asking them about their overall satisfaction with recreation services here in the county, where they might live in the county, and any specific experiences they may have with recreation services. So we're going to be trying to get a little bit more granular than we did last time and ask all those questions. We have the benefit of having a few months since the last one of having a wider universe of people to reach out to who are interested in the subject.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add that we also have a link on the website for to take our customers to the website. And we have been also promoting it on our social media, Facebook page, Instagram. So any of the meetings we are continuously promoting.
Great. Yes, thank you, Barbara. I was just actually typing in the chat that we're going to ask you to indicate which of the subcommittees you'd like to be on, and your choices are budget and finance, programs and services, or operations. And we will take all that information and then balance that, to work with Ryan and team to balance that information, to make sure that we have an appropriate amount of people represented on each group.
Did you mention where the social pinpoint survey link is, or how people?
I can actually drop that in the chat after this so that you can just copy and paste it to your browser.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And for the benefit of the public, that link is also on the county executive's website under initiatives. So anyone will be able to access it. I see Delegate Harrison has her hand raised.
Thank you. And let me first do a mic check. Can you hear me okay? And is there too much background noise?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, while this is, all of this has been interesting information as it relates to the commission, but if we remember correctly, the whole impetus of this particular work group that we got here was mainly focused around sports. That's what all of this was about, and pulling, they were saying recreation, but when you got right down to it, it was really just about the sports component of that part of park and planning. And so in the meetings that I've been able to participate in so far, I've not heard a thing about that, which is what this was all about in the beginning. Are we going to get to that? And if so, when? And so that we can move, cut across the field and get to the end.
Ryan, I'll start that, but I think that you may have a broader thought about that. It was our understanding, and this is what our approach is that we are considering all of the programs and services across the board under MNCPPC, not with a specific focus on youth athletics or athletics in general.
That's
Okay, but that's what the legislation, that's what the initial legislation was about. And so, and that was initially what we were hearing. That was the original hearing that when we were in session during this past session, it was really, it was really specifically about the sports program. And I know that there have been a few other people who have talked about perhaps the performing arts part of recreation. But I'm just, it's all useful information. It's all good information. It was especially good for the time that I spent on the county council, but as a state legislator, and talking about pulling recreation out of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Department, with all of the emphasis that we kept hearing about the sports part of it. I guess I'm a little bit more interested in hearing where we're going with that, because that's what the whole initial argument was about. And so, I'm not sure where anyone else is with this, but that's how it was presented. So I guess I'm just going to sit back and listen, but the information is good, but I'm trying to cut to the chase.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the work group covers all the recreational programs, but I think that subcommittee for programs would be the individuals who looked at the specific programs in detail, correct?
Yes, so the work group is going to cover all of recreation, everything having to do with recreation services in the county, including operations, financial stuff. So all the nuts and bolts and everything having to do with that. in addition, the youth sports component will be a major part of this, and one thing that we're going to get to in our.
Sorry, did you say it will or will not?
It will. It will.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Youth sports will be a major, because Delegate Harrison, you're absolutely right on that front, that youth sports will be a major component of what we're doing here in examining everything. But we also have to examine all the other stuff as well.
Okay,
Right,
I
it's
just
like-
wanted us to remember the you know, how we even got to this point. I don't want that to get lost and buried in everything else. And not that I'm against it. So let me just make that clear. I'm not against it, but I just want us to remember how we even got to this point and where this conversation initially began. So thank you.
Thanks. Ryan and Ms. Harrison, if I can just add to that, one of the things that Ryan and I talked about last week was the distribution of the recently completed youth and countywide sports strategic plan. And it is very comprehensive, and I think it will provide some context as to where the agency is at this very moment. There are lots of layers that happened that were analyzed, and lots of outcomes to that. And if Bill or Wanda want to chime in on this, but I know that they are midstream in implementation of that strategic plan. And I think that might actually give you some background as to where youth sports rests at this point and where it is going in the future. So with that said, I believe we are going to distribute that plan to this panel for your reading pleasure between now and the next meeting in a couple of weeks. And then if there are any questions offline, we can certainly address those.
So I just do want to confirm the program subcommittee will be looking at all of the different.
Yes.
Okay. Because sports is important, but there are a lot of other programs that are important as well.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I did have one question. That data map that you had on your website that showed the heat points, is that going to be available on the that social pinpoint website for the public too?
We haven't posted it there. I'll have to talk. That was part of the strategic plan, and I can certainly include that in the conversation that I'm having with with leadership in the next couple of days, because I'm not sure if that's public facing at this point. But I'll take that note and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
And will we be able to get a copy of your slides from today's meeting?
Yes, absolutely. I'll provide those to Ryan right after.
Okay. And if there are no further questions, can I have a motion to schedule a closed meeting to discuss logistics?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And all against? Hearing none. Ryan, would you be able to schedule that for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Hearing no other discussion, this meeting is adjourned at 3:01 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.